So today I'm here in my hat of a plant biologist working at Eötvös Loránd University and also as a member of the Academia Europaea task force for environment, sustainability and climate, in which we are also trying to foster interdisciplinary discussions and use the knowledge of Academia Europaea and the Young Academy of Europe members to discuss these great challenges mankind has at the moment and which cannot be saved without collaboration of various interdisciplinary research groups. So I'm working with plastids, as I will talk. These are like chloroplasts, so the organelles of plants which are doing photosynthesis. And this is my lab. So I'm doing basic research, but I always tried to get it in a wider and more interdisciplinary context. So I'm teaching, and I also invented and added some curricula which were developed to talk about, let's say, pharmaceutical botany, not only basic subjects like the cell biology or anatomy of the plants, but also I have a course on crop biology, which is really nice because I have some students from the HUN-REN University who are at the moment in a European Common Master released by 8 universities, which is entitled Global Challenges for Sustainability. And it's really nice because I have there students who have no biology background, but who are all interested in these questions of food security and also the uses of crops and all related challenges. What I would like from a personal perspective outline is that I have the feeling, maybe I'm wrong, and I hope that my fellow researchers here are working in a more interdisciplinary setting, but I do have the feeling that in Hungary, when compared to other researchers I know from the global scene or from Europe, are less accustomed or very often not quitting their narrow fields of research, and interdisciplinary dialogue is maybe less developed, and even more, I would say, the dialogue with the transdisciplinarity, which I define here as interaction with industry or interaction with policymakers or citizens or NGOs. That's also maybe less developed in Hungary, but maybe I'm just talking from my own niche or from my own environment. But this is why I think it's really nice to have this meeting today to foster common discussion on these. And as mentioned also yesterday when I was talking about the science advice mechanism of the European Commission, all these require good science communication skills, because we need to make policymakers understand, or lay people, citizens, farmers understand what they could do to improve agricultural practices or medicinal or any other type of practices. And this brings us to the One Health concept, which I guess you know maybe better than me, as I'm a plant biologist, but which is really describing the phenomenon that we all feel and that we already discussed yesterday, that everything is interconnected. You cannot have human health without having wild and domestic animal health, plant health, health of the soil, and also, a healthy environment and biosphere, because we are so much interconnected. And this is also what is leading us to the issue to try to work on these solutions together from scientists from different disciplines. In this respect, there are many things we can mention, and there is a nice summary on this One Health concept, which describes things that I think many of us have just already experienced, unfortunately. For example, with the COVID-19, is that as wild areas and habitats of animals and humans are getting closer to each other, zoonotic diseases, so diseases that we are getting from wild animals or other animals, are emerging and threatening human health. Also, we have issues with food safety and security. I will come back to this a little bit later, because if we need to feed the 8 billion people, we need to have large agricultural areas, and very often for plant productivity, especially in the context of climate change, we need to use pesticides or agricultural, and especially in monocultures, they need to use all kinds of chemicals, and then these chemicals enter not only the plants but animals which are consuming them, and also humans. So that's all interrelated. There are diseases associated with maybe the change of the lifestyle, of urbanization, so people, and also actual working culture in several areas that need to be treated. The mental health was mentioned yesterday and also now by Tom. So that is also an important issue. So not only physical, but mental health effects are also important when we are talking about how climate change influences our lives. So in Mediterranean areas, elderly people during heat waves in summer might have serious health issues, and the same can be mentioned for the younger generation. I think it's mostly climate anxiety that we are seeing or experiencing even among our students. So there are also vector-borne diseases. So in Hungary, there are always news about new invasive species of mosquitoes or ticks, which are now, due to climate change or due to global commercialization and global transportation of plants and crops, coming and moving between countries, and they are not only causing human disease, but again, I would like to outline plant health. So they are also causing big losses if these are pests or these are insects that are consuming plants. So that's also an issue not only for human health but agriculture. And last but not least, I think most of you have heard about antimicrobial resistance, which is a big issue. There is a fantastic science documentary. I was in a jury of a film festival in which this was one of the winners. It's a German film, Silent Pandemics is the title, in which it's greatly explained that 1.3 million people die every year on the global scale out of antimicrobial resistance. And I guess most of us have heard about some bacteria which have become resistant to antibiotics, but it's also important to mention that fungal diseases are much harder to detect. So very often, by the time you are detecting that you are dealing with a fungal infection, the patient dies and you don't even find a cure. And especially if due to the excessive use of fungicides by agriculture, the mushroom you got infected with is resistant, then it's even harder to get cured. So as I mentioned by these examples, this requires communication and work together for experts in human medicine, in plant sciences, animal sciences, agriculture, and environmental sciences. So we have only one health, both animals, humans, and plants, and the soil and the biosphere. And we also have only one planet. And I like this presentation because it clearly shows the boundaries of our planet, which we have overpassed in the last years. So the scale is quite, terrifying, at least for me, that the estimations made by the Stockholm Resilience Center in 2019 said that we have only bypassed or crossed 3 of these boundaries: the biosphere integrity, climate change, and geochemical flow for nitrogen. But by 2015 also phosphorus became limited, or at least these are problems. And I think Sierd mentioned yesterday, or maybe Reinhard, the nitrogen in the soil, and which is a big problem, and the same goes for phosphorus, which is required for plant growth and agriculture. Also changes in the land system are now we are already using or above the planetary boundaries, which are considered to be healthy. And the worst is on 2023. So fresh water is scarce. There is scarcity of fresh water, and there are other issues. Only 3 areas are where we are already close to to the boundaries. These are ocean acidification, atmospheric aerosol loading, and stratospheric ozone depletion. So we have to do a lot. There are plenty of things to be aware of and try to make our systems, especially agricultural production, more sustainable. And this has also several aspects. I won't go too much into details about these, but of course we need to try to be economically viable, and also the resources should be used optimally. We should also try to be socially equitable, and at the same time we need to produce food which is nutritionally ideal or adequate, and we should take care of the ecological footprint to be small, and also we should be able to get adapted to all kind of environmental changes. So there are different methods to do this. I think for the sake of the time I will not talk too much in detail about climate-smart farming systems, but as I said, due to the problems with the land use or the limitations of land use, it is getting harder to get this bio production, because maybe it won't be enough to feed the mankind. So I'm a plant biologist, and as I mentioned, I'm working with plastids and photosynthesis and how chlorophyll is synthesized, and it is quite nice to see this image from the space on Earth, where we can see how during winter you can see that on the northern hemisphere we have these white areas where there is no photosynthesis detected, and then it changes just the other way around. So we have a lot of production of chlorophylls. Chlorophylls are used to capture light energy and then make food, basically, to simplify things for animals, and of course materials for plants, and then animals and humans. What I would like to outline here, that we should not only concentrate on forests, but a very important amount of photosynthesis is going on in the sea. And even there, I think it might be interesting to know that not the tropical seas are the most important in photosynthetic activity, but if you see, it is more to the northern and southern hemisphere in so-called moderate temperate climate areas where the oceans have this brighter green color, so activity of microalgae, mostly diatoms, which are floating, so not the seaweeds, but unicellular algae, which is important. In this respect, I wanted to mention, I said I will just give a kind of small examples that what I'm doing and what I think are important. So one of them is that there is a huge diversity, or unknown diversity, I would say, of microalgae, because there are estimations about 700,000 of them being living on Earth, and we only know 10,000 of them, because they can be only detected in microscope, and even these microalgae are only green balls, let's call them like this, and you cannot really determine them. Of course, if you go on an expedition and you are taking samples, you can determine the DNA, the natural DNA, but you won't know which DNA belongs to which species, so you need to culture them. That's the first problem. Some algae cannot be, or it's not so easy to cultivate them under laboratory conditions. You need to dilute your natural sample until only one species is present, and then you need to describe the species based on the DNA and also on the structure. And in case of these small green balls, the only thing you can do is to go to the electron microscope, and then in the cellular structure is described. So we have isolated from Hungary, from a lake which is not a temporary lake, some algae, and we have described this. And we hope that some of them really do have industrial applications. Not only seaweeds can be edible, some microalgae are also, I would talk about cyanobacteria, are edible, and they are used as food colorants or coloring food, rather they are called this way, and their impact in CO2 fixation should be also considered. Yesterday, when I think Reinhard talked about the root, also in his lecture, but later on during the dinner. So I decided to show you this image because I think it's really fantastic to see that the root system of a plant is as big as the leaf and the branches. Or so the sizes should be imagined like this for a tree. And that means that quite a lot of CO2 fixed by the plants is staying in the soil, and that was mentioned that's a carbon sink also. And as we will discuss, or as it is written there, they also influence after plants have invaded land and they started to form organs and the root was formed. They also influence minerals and changes by the respiration of the roots. They were producing and releasing CO2, changing minerals, so from silicate towards carbonates. And a lot of amount of CO2 in the Devon was pumped into plants and in the soil. And this is how soil was basically formed. And this is also how it is maintained, or at least part of it. So, and there are roots which go up to 50 meters height, but of course, most of them, and especially grasses, it's rather located in the upper part. So they are important for all kind of issues, like also the water uptake, but that's not so much surprising. So plants are able to fix CO2, and it's 1.5% that they fix, but unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but normally they also should breathe and use the CO2, so some of them is released, so it's not so much effective, and there is decomposition. In this respect, it is important to mention that the woody material called lignin, so what makes woods really hard, is something which is not so easily decomposed. There are only few fungi which are able to degrade lignin or to digest lignin, let's call it like this. And there are also other materials called tannins. These are also called, condensed tannins are also called proanthocyanidins, which you may know from red wine, especially the barric versions, because this is the one which gives the wine this astringent taste, because it's a material which binds to proteins. So that's also something which is really hard to get degraded, and this is something which could be used. For example, if we want to take out some CO2 from the cycle, we should maybe grow plants which have a high tannin content or lignin content for the carbon cycle to remove it. And there are many, many human breeding programs which are aiming at improving photosynthesis so that plants are more effectively storing CO2 even under adverse conditions. And I don't think I will go too much into changes, because you all know that when land plants arrived and started to make CO2 fixation, the atmosphere and then the atmospheric composition of CO2 and oxygen has changed. So these tannin molecules, I will just very briefly mention that with French œnologists, so working with vine and grape wine, we have found and described a completely novel organelle which is involved in the production of these tannin molecules. It's also produced by plastids. So the field, I'm not going too much in detail. I just wanted to mention that it is something, research that we've done with scientists from Montpellier. And then what I'm also interested is how plants react to climate change. So I will give a few examples of what I'm doing. One of them is, as we know, drought stress, and I'm dealing with drought stress, but I put in the title that we should never forget that water scarcity is one side of the thing, and the other side is that was also mentioned probably today, floodings and inland water. They are all causing extremely important stress for the plants and losses for agriculture, because if there is water in the soil, anaerobic processes are going on, also the roots might be damaged, and that's not good for trees or any kind of agricultural systems. And of course, the other side, drought, is evidently also not so easy to survive. There are some interesting and maybe threatening or not so positive numbers about how much of land is affected by drought stress, and also due to climate change. they are unpredictable, their length increases, their frequency might increase, and that's a threat for agricultural production. And many people who are either living from agriculture or simply because of the food safety, food security, so to have enough food are affected by it quite importantly, and there are also huge economic losses. Well, I have difficulties to imagine those numbers, billions of dollars, but not only at the European but global level, these are also big losses in agriculture. So there is a lot of research that has to be done about how to make plants which are better adapting to drought or other stresses available. So plants, since they have conquered the land, so they left the oceans and the sea, they had to develop systems that make them resist the water scarcity. So there are several mechanisms by which they try to adapt. Some of them are escaping drought. That means that when there is a drought period, they very quickly form seeds and they die and they leave the problem for the next generation. These are plants with a kind of escape strategy towards drought stress. Others are trying to avoid it. So you probably know plants which are either trying to store water, like cacti, so that during the drought period they survive from their reserved water, or they try to minimize transpiration and this way survive this not so positive or problematic stress in time periods. And there are few plants, most of the plants are trying to live with the drought stress, so they develop molecular mechanisms which protect them or try to help them to maintain photosynthesis during this process. So various structural, physiological tolerance mechanisms have been developed. And there are also quite strange type of plants which are like, I guess you probably know mosses, that they can, if there is drought, they can survive in an anabiotic state. That means that they are like looking dead, let's call it. They are stopping their metabolism and they just wait for the water to come, and then after the rain comes, they are reviving again. That is something which is rarely observed among higher plants, but there are examples for this with which we also made some research. I think I have explained this one, and I will just show you examples of what we are doing. We are trying to discover and analyze the mechanisms of plants which are very successful in surviving long periods of drought. So I would say an ideal house plant is this Stenanthe setosa, which is not it's an ornamental crop, so it's widely used in green walls and maybe in hotel lobbies, but it's not an edible plant. That this plant can survive almost 60 days without watering, and we have been analyzing, and I don't think I want to go too much into the details of photosynthesis and the transcriptomic analysis we have performed, but we wanted to understand the mechanisms with which this plant survives water stress, and then how it is then recovered from it, because that's another aspect which is important for agriculture, how plants are later on reaching, getting recovered from the stress. I think I will skip some of these slides, and for interdisciplinarity, I just brought this example here because I'm working with physicists, biophysicists, and we are doing, we are going to synchrotrons or different international core facilities where we are analyzing the plants with neutron scattering. We can observe the membranes of the photosynthetic apparatus this way, and it was the first time when we have described drought stress plants and how they react to drought and how their membranes are recovering. And it's interesting because usually we use electron microscopy, and the samples, the dry samples, need to be put into a solution to fix them, to prepare them. And during sample preparation, when you put a completely dry leaf in a solution with water, you are not sure that what you will see in the microscope is really the dry plant, or it has still or already absorbed some water. While using this non-invasive technique, we could observe in vivo, and also this electron microscopic sampling is an invasive method. So this way, with the small angle neutron scattering, we could follow recovery in fully native state. I think I will just briefly show some of the plants we have been dealing with and which are living in habitats with no water and in tropical and subtropical inselbergs in Africa and other areas of the world, and which are, as you see on the image, when there is the wet period or the rainy period, they are green, but when the longer drought period comes, they become yellowish. And their plastids are also changing and accommodating and trying to get somehow adapted to tolerate drought stress. Another point I will just very briefly discuss is salinity, which we have also as a problem. Of course, we all know the story of Carthago and some stories from the Bible about people having discovered that soil salinity is a big threat to agriculture because no plants will grow, well, or almost no plants will grow on soils which are saline. And this is a global issue in several countries. It's a problem, and again, if you want, you can check the numbers. So what is striking that 10% of the total global land area is already affected by salinity, and some of them are really no longer used or not much used. And what is surprising in the context of sustainable agriculture, and where I'm also doing research, is how this affects the young plants that develop in the soil, because during plant development, what you see is that the germination occurs within 4 days, and the plants, if they are germinated in light, they become green, they have chloroplast. But if they are growing in the soil, so they are germinating in the soil, as it is written in agricultural protocols, they might get peculiar plastid systems and also they are not able to do photosynthesis, and the stress affects them, but there is not much research on understanding how these plants which are sown deep in the soil are reacting to salinity. And for this, I would like to outline, and I was glad that also Siad mentioned the cost actions that helped interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary cooperation in their fields. So I was involved in one about soil salinization. And the most interesting part is that we are trying to work about discussing with farmers and giving them examples of plants that are crops and that can grow also in areas with high salt content. So the Netherlands also has problems with it because of the sea level and the sea seepage, so infiltration. Hungary has problem with sodic soils due to natural phenomena, and this is what we are trying to discuss and improve and get practices, policy papers on this issue. And with Academia Europa and this task force, we were also thinking about this really interdisciplinary setting and what could be done to promote and transformative changes in various climate change, sustainability, and environment-related issues. And here are the different sections of Academia Europa listed, and we organized an event on which we invited almost from all sections some representatives. This is where I met Phoebe, the next speaker, and we tried to discuss the potential of Academia Europa into releasing statements, opinion papers, and trying to move forward this agenda of the problems of sustainability and climate. So we had a meeting in Cambridge, and I think I will stop here, and thank you very much for your attention. Are there any questions? Yes.
So congratulations to this really brilliant presentation. Maybe it will be silly questions, sorry, because I am not in this field, but for me, if I think about sustainable agriculture, for me, 2 questions immediately come to my mind. One of them, it's very trivial that there is a climate change. So maybe nations, countries need to shift from one kind of agriculture product to another one, the transition, like they made some grains, wheels, now they change to crops. So which is not easy because they have cultural traditions, what they are doing. So my question is, what could be the significance of this transition in single countries from one product to the other? and how academies, like Academy European national academies, can help to give information to policymakers that what direction they should prepare their own countries. And my second question would be about, in medicine, it's very trivial that precision medicine definitely elevates the success rates of treatment and also to have sustainable healthcare. So what about in agriculture, about precision agriculture, where there are different innovation technologies bringing to elevate the effectiveness of production would help or not? So these two questions.
Okay, so the first one, obviously there are changes. For example, Hungary, if you remember, I think in 2022 and also last year, we had very long drought periods and all maize fields were basically dried out and there was no yield. So I think there should be similar policy briefs or opinions provided to farmers or decision makers, and we are expecting huge changes in, in this area. For example, it is said that climate change might have a positive effect on wheat production in Siberia. I don't know in how many years, but there are some areas which we are losing as arable lands or for agricultural production, but there might be others which will be hopefully also be able to be used for production of some other species. I'm not so much aware, maybe Phoebe knows better, or maybe Peter can comment later on this, but I'm not aware of so many. There are policy briefs, or for saline agriculture, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations gives out kind of guidelines or proposals of how to shift or which plants to grow on those affected areas. And I think there must be also some about agricultural production, and precision agriculture is also widely and strongly developing field where, for example, drones to improve plant health and early identification of infections or pests like rust fungi, which are very dreadful and very difficult to be treated. These are very useful to try to for plant protection and plant health. Thank you very much. If there are there any more questions? If not, then I would like to call our next speaker, Phoebe Kunduri, who is both working at the Athens University of Economics and Business and the Technical University of Denmark as professor. And she has also several other functions that she might show on her first slides. And she's also the co-chair of the Academia Europaea Task Force on Sustainability, Agriculture, Environment and Climate.